What would you do if God called you to lead a nation against an army of 900 iron chariots? Think about it for a moment. The fear, the doubt, the overwhelming odds stacked against you. Now imagine stepping into that role as a woman in a time when women were rarely seen as leaders. This is the story of Deborah, a prophetess, a judge, and an unlikely hero who defied every expectation to save her people. For 20 years the Israelites lived in terror, oppressed by a ruthless enemy. They were trapped, hopeless, and afraid to even leave their homes. But one woman's courage changed everything. Deborah didn't just lead, she inspired a nation to rise up and fight for their freedom. Her story isn't just about victory on the battlefield, it's about faith, obedience, and the extraordinary power of trusting God's plan. This is the story of Deborah, a leader who trusted God, inspired a nation, and proved that faith can move mountains. Stay with me to discover how Deborah's story can inspire you to step into your own calling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of faith and courage. To understand the magnitude of Deborah's courage, we need to step back and see the world she lived in. For 20 long years, the Israelites suffered under the oppressive rule of King Jabin of Canaan and his ruthless army commander Sisera. With 900 iron chariots at his disposal, Sisera's forces were unmatched, spreading terror across the land. The Israelites were not just defeated, they were broken. Fear gripped their hearts, and hopelessness became their daily reality. They were so afraid of their oppressors that many didn't dare to leave their homes, let alone dream of freedom. Imagine living in such conditions. Every day you wake up knowing that your enemy could strike at any moment. Your fields, your livestock, even your family's safety, all of it is at the mercy of a merciless foe. The roads were unsafe, trade was crippled, and the people's spirits were crushed. This wasn't just a physical battle, it was a spiritual and emotional siege. The Israelites cried out to God, but for 2 decades it seemed like their prayers went unanswered. But in the midst of this darkness, a light began to shine. Under the shade of a palm tree in Ephraim, a woman named Deborah held court. She wasn't a warrior or a king, she was a prophetess and a judge, a role rarely held by women in that time. Deborah's wisdom and connection to God made her a beacon of hope for the people. They came to her with their disputes, their fears, and their struggles, and she provided not just justice but also guidance and encouragement. Deborah's role was extraordinary. In a patriarchal society, her leadership was a testament to God's power to use anyone, regardless of gender, to fulfill His purposes. She didn't seek the position for herself, she was chosen by God to lead His people during one of their darkest hours. Her presence under the palm of Deborah became a symbol of hope, a reminder that God had not abandoned His people. Can you imagine living in constant fear, afraid to even leave your home? How would you respond to such oppression? For the Israelites, Deborah's leadership was a lifeline. Her story challenges us to trust God even when the odds seem impossible and to recognize that He can use anyone, even the most unlikely among us, to bring about His plans. Deborah's story takes a dramatic turn when God calls her to action. As a prophetess, she was accustomed to hearing from God and delivering His messages to the people. But this time the message was different. It wasn't just a word of encouragement or a judgment, it was a call to war. God instructed Deborah to summon Barak, a man from the tribe of Naphtali, and deliver a divine command. Go and gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. Lead them to Mount Tabor, where I will draw Sisera and his army into your hands. Barak's response, however, revealed the depth of fear that had taken root in the hearts of the Israelites. Instead of embracing the call with confidence, Barak hesitated. He said to Deborah, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." His words exposed a lack of faith and a reliance on Deborah's presence rather than God's promise. Barak's fear of Sisera and his formidable army was so great that he couldn't imagine victory without Deborah by his side. Deborah's reply was both bold and prophetic. She agreed to accompany Barak but declared, "Certainly I will go with you, but because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." This prophecy was significant. It wasn't just a prediction of victory, it was a reminder that God's plans often defy human expectations. The honor of defeating Sisera would not go to Barak, the military leader, but to a woman, a detail that would later prove pivotal in the story. Deborah's willingness to join Barak on the battlefield demonstrated her unwavering faith and commitment to God's plan. She didn't just deliver the message, she stepped into the fray, embodying the courage and leadership that Barak lacked. Her presence was a source of strength for Barak and the Israelite army, reminding them that God was with them. Deborah's actions also underscored the importance of unity in fulfilling God's purposes. She didn't dismiss Barak's fears, instead she stood alongside him, showing that God's work often requires collaboration and mutual support. This moment in Deborah's story teaches us several key lessons. First, it shows that God's calls often require us to step out of our comfort zones. Deborah could have stayed under the palm tree, continuing her role as a judge, but when God called her to lead, she obeyed without hesitation. Second, it highlights the importance of faith over fear. Barak's hesitation was rooted in fear, but Deborah's confidence was rooted in her trust in God's promise. Finally, it reminds us that God's plans are often unexpected. The victory over Sisera would not come through conventional means, but through the courage of a woman, a detail that would soon unfold in a surprising way. What about you? Have you ever felt God calling you to do something that seemed impossible? How did you respond? Deborah's story challenges us to trust God's promises, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic moments in Israel's history. Barak, with Deborah by his side, mobilized 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. As they gathered at Mount Tabor, the tension was palpable. Sisera, with his 900 iron chariots and vast army, was a formidable foe. The Israelites were outnumbered and outmatched in every way. But Deborah's presence was a constant reminder of God's promise. I will draw Sisera and his army into your hands. Deborah played a crucial role in preparing the troops for battle. She wasn't just a spiritual leader, she was a source of encouragement and strength. Her unwavering faith in God's promise inspired the soldiers to trust in His plan, even when the odds seemed impossible. Imagine the scene: Deborah standing before the army, her voice steady and confident, reminding them that the battle was not theirs but God's. Her words echoed the truth that victory comes not through human strength, but through divine intervention. As the battle approached, Deborah delivered a final word of encouragement to Barak: "Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" With these words, Barak led the charge down Mount Tabor. The Israelites descended upon Sisera's army with a courage that could only come from faith. And just as God had promised, He intervened in a miraculous way. The Bible tells us that the Lord threw Sisera's army into confusion. The iron chariots, once a symbol of invincibility, became a liability as the Kishon River overflowed, turning the battlefield into a muddy swamp. The Canaanite soldiers were thrown into disarray, and the Israelites fought with a newfound boldness. Sisera, realizing the battle was lost, abandoned his chariot and fled on foot, seeking refuge in the tent of Jael, a woman from the Kenite tribe. Jael's role in this story is nothing short of extraordinary. When Sisera arrived at her tent, exhausted and desperate, Jael welcomed him in, offering him milk and a place to rest. But as he slept, Jael took a tent peg and a hammer and drove the peg through his temple, ending his life. This act fulfilled Deborah's prophecy: the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Jael's courage and resourcefulness became a pivotal moment in Israel's victory, proving that God's plans often unfold in unexpected ways. The defeat of Sisera marked a turning point for Israel. The Canaanite army was crushed, and King Jabin's power was broken. The Israelites, who had lived in fear for 20 years, were finally free. Deborah's leadership and faith had led them to this moment of triumph. Her song of victory, recorded in Judges 5, celebrates God's deliverance and honors the bravery of those who fought, including Jael. What do you think it was like for Deborah to stand on the battlefield, trusting God's promise? How can we apply that kind of faith in our own lives? Deborah's story reminds us that God's promises are always fulfilled, even when the path to victory seems uncertain. Her courage challenges us to trust God in the face of overwhelming odds and to recognize that He can use anyone, man or woman, to accomplish His purposes. As we reflect on this incredible story, let's ask ourselves, what battles are we facing today? Are we trusting in our own strength, or are we relying on God's promises? Deborah's faith and leadership show us that victory is possible when we align ourselves with God's plan. Deborah's story is more than just a historical account, it's a treasure trove of timeless lessons that speak to us today. Her life exemplifies qualities like courage, faith, obedience, and leadership, showing us what it means to trust God in the face of overwhelming challenges. Let's dive into the key takeaways from her story and how they can inspire us in our own lives. First, Deborah's courage stands out as one of her defining traits. In a time when fear had paralyzed her people, she stepped forward to lead. She didn't wait for someone else to take charge. She answered God's call with boldness. Whether it was standing before Barak encouraging the troops or accompanying them into battle, Deborah's courage was unwavering. Her example challenges us to face our own fears and step into the roles God has called us to, even when the path seems daunting. Second, Deborah's faith was the foundation of her leadership. She trusted God's promises completely, even when the odds were stacked against her. When God said He would deliver Sisera into their hands, Deborah didn't doubt, she acted. Her faith wasn't just theoretical, it was practical and active. This reminds us that true faith requires action. It's not enough to believe in God's promises, we must also step out in obedience, trusting that He will fulfill His word. Third, Deborah's obedience to God's call is a powerful example for us. She didn't question her role as a woman in a male-dominated society or shy away from the enormity of the task. Instead, she embraced her calling with humility and determination. Her obedience wasn't conditional or half-hearted, it was wholehearted and unwavering. Fourth, Deborah's leadership was marked by wisdom, compassion, and unity. She didn't lead alone. She worked alongside Barak, recognizing the importance of collaboration. Her willingness to accompany him into battle demonstrated her commitment to God's plan and her understanding that victory required unity. This highlights the importance of working together to achieve God's purposes. Whether in our families, workplaces, or communities, we are called to lead with humility and a spirit of partnership. Deborah's story also reminds us that God often uses unlikely leaders to accomplish His purposes. In a society where women were rarely seen as leaders, Deborah's rise to prominence was extraordinary. Yet God chose her precisely because He doesn't look at outward appearances or societal norms. He looks at the heart. This is a powerful reminder that God can use anyone regardless of their background, gender, or perceived limitations to fulfill His plans. If He can use Deborah, He can use you and me too. So how can we apply these lessons to our lives today? Let's start by examining our own challenges. Are we facing a situation that requires courage? Are we struggling to trust God's promises in the midst of uncertainty? Are we hesitating to step into a role God has called us to? Deborah's story encourages us to take that first step of faith, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. One area where many of us struggle is unity. Just as Deborah and Barak worked together to achieve victory, we are called to collaborate with others in fulfilling God's purposes. This might mean setting aside our pride, embracing humility, and recognizing that we are stronger together than we are alone. Whether it's in our families, churches, or communities, unity is essential for achieving God's plans. Finally, Deborah's story challenges us to trust God's timing. For 20 years the Israelites cried out to God and it seemed like He was silent. But in His perfect timing, what's one area of your life where you need to step out in faith like Deborah? Is it in your career, your relationships, or your spiritual journey? Whatever it is, take a moment to reflect on how Deborah's story can inspire you to trust God and take that first step. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how her story resonates with you. Deborah's life is a testament to the power of faith, courage, and obedience. Her story reminds us that no matter how impossible our circumstances may seem, God is always in control. When we align ourselves with His plan and trust His promises, He can use us to accomplish extraordinary things. So let's take inspiration from Deborah and step into our own callings with confidence, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. From Deborah we learn the importance of stepping out in faith, even when the path ahead seems uncertain. We see the value of unity and collaboration, as demonstrated by her partnership with Barak. And we're reminded that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels like He's silent. Deborah's story challenges us to trust God in every season of life and to embrace the roles He has called us to, no matter how unconventional they may seem. So what is God calling you to do today? Is He asking you to step into a leadership role, to trust Him in a difficult situation, or to collaborate with others to achieve a greater purpose? Whatever it is, take inspiration from Deborah's example. Her story proves that when we align ourselves with God's plan, He can use us to bring about extraordinary change. If this message inspired you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more stories of faith and courage. Your support helps spread these timeless lessons to others who need encouragement. And let's continue the conversation in the comments. What's one lesson from Deborah's story that resonates with you? Is it her courage, her faith, or her willingness to trust God's timing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Deborah's incredible story. May her life inspire you to step out in faith, trust God's promises, and embrace the calling He has placed on your life. Remember, no matter how impossible your circumstances may seem, God is with you, and He can use you to accomplish great things.